Part 1. The Betrayal. The stars had never looked so beautiful to Dae-hyun as they did from the observation deck of the UES horizon. After 200 years of reaching into space alone, humanity was finally about to meet their neighbors. The Galactic Council had sent the invitation 3 months ago, and now Earth's finest diplomatic team was on its way to the Council station. Captain Hana stood beside him, her uniform crisp and her expression calm. She had commanded the horizon for 5 years, and this was her most important mission yet. Behind them, Chief Science Officer Tae-min reviewed data on his tablet, muttering excitedly about the technological exchanges they might achieve. Everyone was hopeful. Everyone believed this was humanity's chance to join something greater. The Council station appeared ahead, a massive structure that dwarfed anything humans had ever built. It orbited a yellow star in neutral space, glittering with lights from 1,000 different ships. Dae-hyun felt his heart race. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything. They docked without incident, and the airlock opened to reveal the Council's greeting committee. The aliens were strange and wonderful. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some had scales. Others had fur or skin that seemed to shift colors. At the front stood High Counselor Vextra, a tall reptilian creature with cold golden eyes. Dae-hyun stepped forward and extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Vextra looked at the hand for a long moment, then turned away without taking it. The other counselors whispered among themselves, and Dae-hyun heard what sounded like laughter. The diplomatic proceedings began in a vast chamber where hundreds of alien species gathered. Dae-hyun presented humanity's case. He spoke of Earth's achievements, their art and culture, their scientific progress. He showed images of human cities, of children playing in parks, of the Mars colonies that had taken decades to build. Diplomatic Overseer Quiln, an insectoid creature with multiple eyes, interrupted him halfway through. The translator made Quiln's clicking sounds into words. Your technology is primitive. Your culture is young and unrefined. Your species has barely left your home world. Dae-hyun tried to protest, but Vextra raised a clawed hand for silence. The Council has reviewed your planet. You have resources we find valuable. Your people, however, are numerous and consume much. We have decided to implement the Primitive World Taxation Act. Tae-min leaned forward in his seat. What does that mean? Vextra's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. It means the Council will manage 60% of your system's resources. For galactic security, you understand. You are too young to use them properly. The words hit Dae-hyun like a physical blow. This wasn't first contact. This was conquest dressed in diplomatic language. He stood, his voice rising. You can't just take our resources. We've worked for generations to build what we have. Those are our colonies, our minds, our future. Quiln's multiple eyes focused on him. You are not in a position to refuse. The Council's military ensures compliance. You may return to your world and inform your leaders of this decision. Resistance will be considered an act of terrorism. Captain Hana's hand moved toward her sidearm, but Dae-hyun caught her eye and shook his head. They were surrounded by guards, and the horizon was alone in a station full of potential enemies. They had no choice but to leave. The journey back to Earth felt longer than the trip out. Dae-hyun stared at the stars and wondered how something so beautiful could hide such cruelty. When they arrived, President Ji-won called an emergency meeting. The conference room was full of Earth's leaders, all of them angry and afraid. Military Commander Woo Jin slammed his fist on the table. We need to prepare our defenses immediately. They'll come for more than resources once they realize we won't submit quietly. Intelligence Director Yuna shook her head. If we fight, they'll label us as terrorists. They control the narrative across 400 species. We'll be alone. President Ji-won looked tired. We'll comply for now, but quietly we prepare. If they want to fight, we'll give them one they never forget. But not yet. Not until we're ready. The Council didn't wait long to begin their operations. Within a week, massive mining ships arrived at Earth's moon. They set up equipment without asking permission, and when human workers tried to stop them, Council guards pushed them aside. The same thing happened on Mars and in the asteroid belt. The worst came when they arrived at New Sol, a mining station that housed 15,000 human colonists. The station had been built over 20 years, a small city floating in space where families lived and worked together. Commander Kyung-soo commanded the small militia force that protected the station. When the Council ships arrived, Kyung-soo tried to negotiate. He explained that these were people's homes, that they couldn't just leave everything they'd built. The council commander didn't respond with words. He responded with weapons. The attack came without warning. Energy beams tore through the station's hull. Explosions ripped apart living quarters and work areas. People died in the vacuum of space, their final moments spent gasping for air that wasn't there. Kyung-soo and his militia fought back, but their weapons were useless against council shields. Captain Hana received the distress call on the horizon. She pushed the engines to their limit, racing toward New Seoul. But she knew in her heart she would arrive too late. When the station came into view, it was barely recognizable. Debris floated everywhere. Bodies drifted in the darkness. Of the 15,000 people who had lived there, only a few hundred survived in the emergency pods. Among the dead was Minji, Dae-hyun's daughter. She had been a young engineer, excited about her work on the station's new solar arrays. Now she was gone, killed because the council wanted to send a message. Dae-hyun stood in the morgue where they had brought the bodies they could recover. He looked at his daughter's face, peaceful in death, and something inside him broke. The grief was overwhelming, but beneath it was something else. Something cold and hard and patient. The council broadcast their version of events across the galaxy. They claimed the colonists had fired first, that they were hostile insurgents who refused lawful council authority. They showed fabricated evidence, and the other council species accepted it without question. Why wouldn't they? The council had never lied before, but humanity knew the truth. 15,000 innocent people had been murdered for daring to defend their homes, and in that moment something changed in the human species. They had reached out to the stars hoping to find friends. Instead, they had found tyrants. President Ji-won addressed the human race from Earth. Her words were careful and measured, but everyone heard the promise beneath them. We will remember New Seoul. We will remember every name, every face, every life that was stolen from us. And one day we will make them answer for what they've done. In secret facilities across the solar system, construction began. In hidden bases, soldiers trained harder than they ever had before. In classified laboratories, scientists worked on weapons the Council had never imagined. Humanity bowed its head and accepted Council rule, but they were not broken. They were planning. And the Council, comfortable in their power, never suspected that the primitive species they had just humiliated would become their worst nightmare. Part 2. The shadow years. 5 years passed like a slow burn. To the galaxy, Earth appeared broken and compliant. Human workers operated Council mining facilities without complaint. Human ships moved through space following every Council regulation. Human diplomats nodded and smiled at Council meetings, accepting every decision without argument. The Galactic Council believed they had successfully tamed another primitive species. They were completely wrong. In the darkness of the Kuiper Belt, far from the inner solar system where Council observers watched, humanity was building something terrible. President Ji-won had authorized the Phantom Initiative within days of the New Seoul massacre. Only 12 people in the entire government knew the full scope of the project. Everyone else worked on small pieces, never seeing the complete picture. General Wu Jin, promoted after his aggressive stance during the crisis, oversaw construction of the hidden shipyards. They were built inside hollowed asteroids, invisible to scanners, powered by reactors that produced no detectable emissions. Beneath Europa's ice sheets, more shipyards carved out massive construction bays. The ice above was thick enough to hide everything. Engineer Hyeon led the design team. She had studied every piece of Council technology they could get their hands on, legally or otherwise. She understood their weapons, their shields, their engines, and she found their weaknesses. Council ships were fast, but human ships could be faster. Council weapons were powerful, but human weapons could hit harder. Most importantly, Council sensors looked for specific energy signatures. Hyun designed ships that produced different signatures, ships that would be invisible until it was too late. Intelligence Director Yuna ran the largest spy network in human history. She had agents on 70 Council worlds working as servants, technicians, and laborers. The Council species barely noticed the humans among them. Why would they? Humans were primitive, defeated, harmless. Yuna's agents listened and watched and reported everything. What they discovered made the New Seoul massacre look like a small crime in a much larger pattern. Earth wasn't the first world the Council had conquered. Over the past 8 centuries, they had subjugated 200 species. Some had been enslaved. Others had been relocated to worthless worlds while the Council took their planets. A few had resisted and been completely destroyed. Their homeworlds turned to ash as examples. The Council maintained power through overwhelming force and ruthless efficiency. Any species that showed signs of rebellion was crushed before they could organize. The Council military numbered in the hundreds of thousands of ships. They had weapons that could burn continents. And they had done this so many times that it had become routine, but they had never faced humans before. Admiral Hana, promoted from captain, trained the new military forces. The volunteers came by the millions. Everyone wanted to serve. Everyone remembered New Sol. Hana pushed them harder than any military in human history. They trained in zero gravity, in extreme heat and cold, in simulations where everything went wrong. They learned to think like predators, to strike fast and disappear, to show no mercy because none had been shown to them. Among the new generation, pilot Su Jin stood out. She was 20 years old, born the year before first contact. She had grown up in a world under Council control, and she hated every second of it. Her reflexes were incredible, her tactical thinking sharp and aggressive. Hana made her the leader of Wraith Squadron, the elite unit that would spearhead the first attacks. Medical officer Dongmin worked on a different kind of weapon. He developed drugs that enhanced human reaction times and endurance. The side effects were dangerous, but every pilot volunteered anyway. They could think faster, move faster, fight longer. In a war where seconds mattered, these enhancements would make the difference between victory and death. Weapons engineer Jay created what he called the Hell Fury torpedo. Standard torpedoes exploded against shields, doing minimal damage. Jay's torpedoes used a phase shift technology that let them pass through shields before detonating inside the target ship. The Council had nothing like it. They didn't even know it was possible. But the most secret project was run by scientist Yoon in a facility so classified that even General Wu Jin didn't know its location. Project Ragnarok was humanity's final weapon, the one they would use only if everything else failed. Yoon had discovered that certain carefully placed explosions could destabilize a star, causing it to collapse into a black hole. The Council's own scientists had theorized about it centuries ago but dismissed it as mathematically impossible. Yoon proved them wrong. Everything accelerated when one of Yuna's agents intercepted a classified Council transmission. The message was clear and terrifying. The Council planned to claim Earth itself under something called eminent domain. They would relocate humanity to a barren moon in a distant system. Earth would become a resort world for Council elite. The operation was scheduled to begin in 6 months. Yuna brought the intelligence to President Ji-won's office in the middle of the night. The president read the message 3 times, then sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "Call everyone. It's time." The meeting happened in a bunker 3 miles beneath the surface. General Wu Jin confirmed that the fleet was ready. 200 ships, all invisible to Council scanners, all crewed by people who had trained for this moment for 5 years. It wasn't enough to fight the Council's full military, but it was enough to start. Admiral Hana showed tactical plans for the first strikes. They would hit 17 Council facilities simultaneously, all of them in human space. The attacks would happen at 0300 Galactic Standard Time, when most Council personnel would be sleeping. No warnings would be given. No mercy would be shown. Pilot Su Jin reported that Wraith Squadron was ready. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with anticipation. She had lost her parents at New Sol. This was personal for her, as it was personal for everyone in that room. President Ji-won looked at each person in turn. "If we do this, there's no going back. The Council will come for us with everything they have. Millions might die. Earth itself might be destroyed. But if we don't do this, we lose Earth anyway. We lose everything that makes us human." She paused, letting the weight of the decision settle. "We were willing to be friends. We offered peace. They chose to make us enemies. Let's show them what human enemies look like." The vote was unanimous. Over the next 6 months, the final preparations moved forward. Ships were moved into position, 1 or 2 at a time, so slowly that Council scanners never noticed the pattern. Weapons were loaded. Pilots ran their final simulations. Soldiers sharpened their blades and checked their armor one last time. Dae-hyun, the former ambassador, had joined the military after his daughter's death. He was too old for combat, but he worked in intelligence now, helping coordinate the strikes. On the night before the attack, He visited the memorial wall where Minji's name was carved along with all the other New Soul victims. He placed his hand on her name and whispered a promise. They'll pay. I swear they'll pay. Across human space, similar scenes played out. People visited graves and memorials. Parents showed their children pictures of relatives they would never meet. Soldiers wrote final letters to their families just in case. Everyone knew what was coming. Everyone knew the risk, but they also knew they had no choice. The Council had started this war 5 years ago when they murdered 15,000 innocent people. Humanity was just going to finish it. At Or 259 Galactic Standard Time, Admiral Hana sat in the command chair of her flagship. Around her, the bridge crew worked in focused silence. Through the view screen, she could see one of the Council's largest mining facilities, brightly lit and completely undefended. They didn't think they needed defenses in their own territory. They were about to learn otherwise. At 0300 exactly, Hana gave the order. All ships, decloak and fire. Part 3. First Blood. The Council mining facility near Jupiter never saw the attack coming. One moment space was empty. The next 20 human warships materialized from nothing, their weapons already firing. Energy beams cut through the station's structure like paper. Torpedoes exploded inside ships that still had their shields down. Within 3 minutes, every Council vessel at the facility was destroyed or crippled. The same scene repeated at 16 other locations across human space. Council personnel woke to alarms and died before they could reach their battle stations. Some tried to surrender, but humanity had learned from New Soul. No prisoners were taken. No mercy was given. This was revenge, pure and simple. Commander Kyung-soo led a special forces team onto the garrison station where the New Soul operation had been planned. They moved through corridors filled with smoke and screaming aliens. Kyung-soo's team was efficient and ruthless. They had trained for years for this moment, and they executed their mission perfectly. The garrison commander, a reptilian officer named Drex, tried to hide in his quarters. Kyung-soo found him there, cowering behind his desk. The commander recognized Kyung-soo from files about the New Soul incident. You were there, Drex said, his translator making his hisses into words. You survived. Kyung-soo nodded slowly. 15,000 people didn't. You gave the order to fire on them. Drex tried to explain, tried to say he was following orders, tried to beg for mercy. Kyung-soo shot him twice, once for each of his own children who had died at New Soul. Then he left the body there and moved on to the next target. By 0400 Galactic Standard Time, every Council facility in human space had been destroyed. Not a single enemy survived. The operation had been perfect, surgical, and absolutely brutal. High Counselor Vextra received the reports in his office on Council Prime. At first, he didn't believe them. The humans were primitive, defeated, controlled. They couldn't possibly have done this. But the evidence was undeniable. 17 facilities gone, 3,000 Council personnel dead, and not a single human casualty. He called an emergency session of the Council. The chamber filled with representatives from 400 species, all of them shocked and confused. How had the humans done this? Where had they gotten such technology? Why had the intelligence services not detected the threat? Diplomatic Overseer Quiln had answers to none of these questions. The human spy network had been perfect. The ships had been invisible. The attack had been coordinated across light years with impossible precision. It shouldn't have been possible for a species so young. Vextra's response was predictable. Send a battle fleet to Earth, 250 ships. Enough to glass the entire planet if necessary. These primitives need to be taught their place. Admiral Thexron received his orders with pleasure. He had been commanding fleets for 40 years and never lost a battle. He would enjoy putting these upstart humans back in their place. Within 6 hours, his fleet assembled and jumped toward Earth. The journey took 3 days. During that time, Admiral Thexron studied everything known about human military capabilities. It wasn't much. They had shown stealth technology and good tactics, but surely they couldn't stand against a proper Council fleet. He outnumbered them 5 to 1 at least, probably more. He was about to discover how wrong he was. The Council fleet arrived near Earth's moon to find Admiral Hana waiting for them. Her fleet looked tiny compared to his, just 40 human ships against his 250. Thexron opened a communication channel, expecting the usual pattern. The younger species would see they were outmatched and surrender. His translator converted his words into human language. This is Admiral Thexron of the Galactic Council Fleet. You are ordered to surrender immediately. Lay down your weapons and prepare to accept Council authority. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your homeworld. There was a long pause. Then Admiral Hana's face appeared on his screen. She looked calm, almost serene. When she spoke, her voice was steady and cold. New soul. Those two words meant nothing to Thexron, but they meant everything to the humans. It was the signal, the reminder of why they were fighting. Hana's ship surged forward, moving faster than should have been possible. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Council military history. Human ships were smaller but impossibly agile, dodging between Council vessels like fighters instead of warships. Their weapons hit with devastating accuracy. The Hellfury torpedoes passed through shields and exploded inside Council ships, ripping them apart from within. Pilot Su Jin led Wraith Squadron in a slashing attack on the Council's fighter wing. The enemy pilots were experienced and skilled, but they had grown comfortable after centuries of easy victories. Su Jin's pilots had trained every day for 5 years, knowing that anything less than perfection meant death. They tore through the Council fighters like wolves among sheep. Admiral Thexron tried to adapt, but human tactics made no sense. They should have fought defensively, protecting Earth. Instead, they attacked aggressively, splitting his fleet into smaller groups and destroying them one at a time. His ships had better shields, but human weapons bypassed them. His ships had more firepower, but human ships were never where his gunners expected them to be. 2 hours into the battle, Thexron realized he was losing. 3 hours in, he ordered a retreat. But Admiral Hana had planned for that too. Human ships appeared behind his fleet, cutting off the escape routes. They had been hiding, cloaked, waiting for exactly this moment. The slaughter that followed was methodical. Council ships tried to surrender, broadcasting pleas for mercy in every language. The humans ignored them all. They had asked for mercy at New Sol and received only death. They would return the favor. By the time the battle ended, only 12 Council ships had escaped, and most of those were too damaged to fight again. Thexron's flagship was crippled, its engines dead, and its weapons offline. Human Marines boarded the vessel, moving through corridors filled with wounded and dying Council personnel. They found Thexron on his bridge, surrounded by his dead crew. He tried to maintain dignity, tried to act like the proud military commander he had been. Admiral Hana appeared on his view screen, her face still calm and cold. "You came here to destroy my world," she said. "You thought we would be easy to defeat. You thought we would surrender when faced with overwhelming force." Thexron said nothing. What could he say? Hana continued. 5 years ago, your council murdered 15,000 of my people. Men, women, children. They were mining workers, engineers, teachers. They were innocent. And your council killed them to send a message. She leaned closer to the camera. "I have a message for your council. Tell them that humanity doesn't forgive. Tell them that humanity doesn't forget. Tell them that we're coming." Thexron started to speak, started to deliver some final insult or threat. Admiral Hana cut the transmission and gave the order. The Marines executed everyone on the flagship's bridge. Then they broadcast the video across the galaxy, ensuring that every Council world could see what happened to those who attacked Earth. The message was clear and brutal. The humans were no longer asking for peace. They were declaring war. Back on Council Prime, High Counselor Vextra watched the broadcast with growing horror. His fleet, his mighty fleet that had never been defeated, had been annihilated. 238 ships destroyed. Thousands of Council personnel dead. And it had taken the humans only 3 hours. For the first time in 800 years, the Galactic Council faced a species that could actually challenge them. Vextra called another emergency session, but this time the mood was different. Some Council species began asking questions. Why had they provoked the humans? Why had they massacred the New Sol colonists? What if the humans were right to fight back? Diplomatic Overseer Quiln tried to maintain order, tried to remind everyone that the Council's authority couldn't be questioned. But seeds of doubt had been planted. Representatives from subjugated species whispered among themselves. Some began quietly contacting their home worlds, telling them about what humanity had done. Rebellions began to spark across Council space. Nothing major yet, just small acts of defiance. A mining crew refusing orders. A transport ship going off course. Supply lines being mysteriously disrupted. But Vexitra understood what it meant. Humanity hadn't just won a battle. They had become a symbol, They had shown that the Council could be beaten, that resistance was possible. And once that idea took root, it would spread like wildfire. Part 4. The Long Knives President G1 stood before the cameras in a broadcast that would reach every corner of Council space. Behind her, through the window, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel. She had rehearsed this speech for months, but now that the moment had arrived, she spoke from her heart. To every species living under Council rule, we have a message. You are not alone. For centuries, the Council has taken your resources, controlled your worlds, and crushed your freedom. They told you that resistance was impossible, that their power was absolute. They lied. She paused, letting the words sink in across 1,000 worlds. Humanity offers you an alliance. We offer you weapons, training, and support. We offer you the chance to fight back. The Council is not invincible. We proved that at the Battle of Luna. Together we can break their chains forever. The broadcast ended, but its effects rippled outward like a shockwave. On 40 different worlds, rebellions erupted within days. Species that had quietly accepted subjugation for generations suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. The Council's military, which had seemed overwhelming, now had to fight on multiple fronts at once. General Wu Jin coordinated humanity's offensive campaign from a command center on Mars. Holographic displays showed the entire Council territory, with red markers indicating Council strongholds and blue markers showing rebel activity. The map was changing rapidly, with new blue markers appearing daily. His strategy was simple but effective. Strike hard, strike fast, and never let the enemy recover. Human fleets would hit a Council military base, destroy it completely, then jump away before reinforcements could arrive. Sometimes they worked alone, sometimes with rebel forces from other species. Every victory weakened the Council and inspired more rebellions. Engineer Hyon's new dreadnoughts entered service, massive ships twice the size of Council battleships. They were slower than the standard human warships, but carried enough firepower to crack planets. At the Battle of Proxima Station, 3 dreadnoughts destroyed a Council fortress that had stood for 500 years. The weapons carved through shields and armor like they were nothing, and the fortress collapsed into rubble within an hour. Intelligence Director Yuna's network grew exponentially. Rebel species shared intelligence with humanity, revealing secret Council facilities and supply routes. Yuna coordinated sabotage operations across dozens of systems. Ships developed mysterious engine failures. Weapons malfunctioned during critical moments. Supply convoys vanished without a trace. The Council tried to maintain control through propaganda, claiming that the rebels were terrorists and humanity was a dangerous threat to galactic peace. But their words rang hollow when people could see Council ships burning in their own skies. The truth was obvious. The Council was losing, and everyone knew it. High Councilor Vextra became increasingly desperate. He ordered more brutal crackdowns on rebellious worlds, but that only created more rebels. He tried to negotiate with humanity, offering minor concessions, but President G1 rejected every offer. Humanity wasn't interested in negotiations. They wanted justice. The turning point came at a place called the Threshold, a star system that controlled access to the core worlds where the most powerful Council species lived. The Council couldn't afford to lose the threshold. If humanity broke through, they could strike at the heart of Council power. Vextra committed everything to the defense. 3,000 warships, including the legendary dreadnought Supreme Authority, assembled at the Threshold. The Supreme Authority had never been defeated in 400 years of service. It was the symbol of Council military might, a ship so powerful that its very presence usually ended battles before they began. Admiral Hana knew this would be the hardest fight yet. Her fleet numbered just 400 human ships, plus another 200 vessels from rebel species. They were outnumbered 7-1, facing the best the Council had to offer, but turning back wasn't an option. If they didn't break through here, the war would drag on for decades. The two fleets met in the darkness between stars. For a moment there was silence, both sides measuring each other, calculating odds and tactics. Then Admiral Hana gave the order to attack and the silence exploded into chaos. The battle raged for 3 days without pause. Ships on both sides fought until their ammunition ran out, then rammed each other in final acts of desperation. The space around the threshold became a graveyard, filled with debris and bodies from a dozen different species. The Supreme Authority lived up to its reputation. Its shields were so strong that weapons bounced off harmlessly. Its guns could destroy a cruiser with a single shot. It sat at the center of the Council formation like an invincible fortress, and human ships died trying to get close to it. Pilot Su-Jin watched her squadron mates fall one by one. Wraith Squadron had started the battle with 30 ships. Now only 12 remained. But she had studied the Supreme Authority's design for years, and she knew its weakness. The shields were powered by reactors deep inside the ship, and those reactors needed cooling vents to prevent overheating. She called for volunteers for a suicide run. Every surviving pilot immediately agreed. They formed up and accelerated toward the Supreme Authority, dodging fire from 100 different ships. The Dreadnought's defensive weapons tore into them. Ships exploded to her left and right. Friends she had trained with for 5 years died in balls of fire, but they kept going. Su-Jin reached the Supreme Authority with only 4 ships left. She locked onto the cooling vents and fired everything she had. Her torpedoes disappeared into the vents, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the reactors overloaded, and the mighty Dreadnought began to tear itself apart from the inside. The Supreme Authority's destruction broke the Council's morale. Their ultimate weapon, their symbol of invincibility, was dying, and the humans just kept coming, wave after wave, never stopping, never retreating. One by one, Council ships began to flee, ignoring their commander's orders to hold position. Medical Officer Dong Min worked around the clock in the fleet hospital ship, treating casualties faster than they arrived. He had been operating for 60 straight hours, sustained by the same combat drugs he had given to the pilots. His hands shook with exhaustion, but he kept working. Every life he saved was a victory against the Council. Weapons Engineer Jay personally manned the guns on Admiral Hana's flagship when the bridge crew was killed in an explosion. He had never trained as a gunner, but he understood weapons better than anyone alive. He fired with mechanical precision, destroying 3 Council ships before damage control teams could relieve him. When the battle finally ended, the human fleet had lost 200 ships. Half their force was gone, but the Council had lost worse. 2,000 ships destroyed, including the Supreme Authority. The survivors retreated toward the core worlds, their formation broken and their spirits shattered. Admiral Hana sat in her damaged command chair, covered in soot and blood. None of it hers. Around her, the bridge crew worked to keep their crippled ship running. Through the cracked view screen, she could see the threshold now in human control. The road to the core worlds was open. Back on Council Prime, Vextra faced the reality of his situation. The Council military was broken. Rebellions raged on 100 worlds, and humanity was coming for him. In a final desperate attempt to salvage something, he sent a secret message to President Ji-won. The message offered peace. The Council would recognize Earth's independence. All mining operations would cease. Humanity would get a seat on the Council, a voice in galactic affairs. They would even pay reparations for New Sol, though the amount was insultingly small. President Ji-won gathered her inner circle to discuss the offer. It was everything they had originally wanted. The war could end. The dying could stop. Humanity would have won. General Wu Jin picked up the message and threw it in the trash. We didn't start this war to get a seat at their table. We started it to burn the table down. Admiral Hana agreed. They're offering us crumbs after taking everything. After murdering our people. After trying to steal our world. No. Intelligence Director Yuna reminded them of the 200 other species still suffering under Council rule. If we accept this deal, we abandon them. We become just another species that made peace with tyrants. President Ji-won looked at each of them, then nodded. She had known what their answer would be before she asked. She sent her response to Vexitra, just 3 words. Come and stop us. Part 5, Ragnarok. The war room fell silent when President Ji-won laid out the final plan. Even these hardened military leaders, people who had fought for years without hesitation, felt the weight of what she was proposing. They weren't just going to defeat the Council. They were going to end it forever. We attack Council Prime, Ji-won said, her finger pointing to the holographic display where the Council's capital world glowed red. We take the entire fleet, everything we have left. We make them commit every ship to the defense. General Wu Jin frowned. That's suicide. They still have 7,000 ships protecting the core worlds. We have maybe 300 that are battle-ready. I know, Ji-won replied calmly. That's why we're not trying to win that battle. We're trying to distract them. Scientist Yoon stepped forward, her face grave. Project Ragnarok is ready. 3 stellar collapse devices, each capable of destroying an entire star system. We've identified 3 uninhabited council systems that serve as military staging grounds. If we activate the devices while their fleet is committed to defending Council Prime, we can destroy their ability to wage war. Admiral Hanna understood immediately. We're not just fighting for victory. We're making sure they can never do this to another species again. The plan was approved within the hour. Every human ship that could still fly would join the assault on Council Prime. Commander Kyungsoo would lead covert teams to deploy the Ragnarok devices. It was the riskiest operation of the war, but also the most necessary. Over the next month, humanity prepared for the final battle. Ships were repaired as much as possible. Ammunition stockpiles were distributed. Pilot Soo-jin trained the newest generation of fighter pilots, young men and women barely old enough to serve but determined to fight. Many of them had been children when New Seoul happened. Now they were ready to make the council pay. Medical Officer Dong-min prepared his hospital ships for the massive casualties they would face. He knew that many of the wounded wouldn't survive the journey home, but he would fight for every life regardless. Weapons Engineer Jay made final adjustments to the fleet's weapons, squeezing every bit of extra power he could from the systems. Meanwhile, Commander Kyungsoo and his teams moved in absolute secrecy toward their targets. They traveled on civilian ships, hiding among regular traffic. The Ragnarok devices were small enough to fit in standard cargo containers, but each one contained enough destructive power to end a star. The Council knew something was coming. Intelligence reports showed increased human activity across all fronts. High Counselor Vextra called back every ship he could spare, concentrating his forces around Council Prime and the core worlds. 7,000 warships assembled in the greatest military gathering in galactic history. Diplomatic Overseer Quiln tried one last time to negotiate, sending messages to President Ji-won offering better terms. Earth could have full independence. Humanity could have 3 seats on the council. The reparations would be increased significantly. But the messages went unanswered. Humanity was done talking. The human fleet arrived at Council Prime to find the entire council military waiting for them. Admiral Hanna looked at the tactical display and felt a moment of doubt. 300 human ships against 7,000 enemy vessels. The odds were worse than at the threshold, and they had barely survived that battle. But then she thought of Minji, Daehyun's daughter, dead at New Seoul. She thought of the 15,000 others who died that day. She thought of the 200 species enslaved by the council, and her doubt vanished. All ships, she broadcast. This is the moment we've been fighting for. They're going to throw everything at us, and most of us probably won't survive the day. But we're not here to survive. We're here to make sure the council never hurts anyone again. For Earth, for New Seoul, for freedom. The battle began with humanity's standard aggressive tactics. Human ships dove into the council formation, spreading chaos and destruction. Pilot Soo-jin's Wraith Squadron targeted command ships, killing enemy admirals and disrupting communications. Engineer Hyon's dreadnoughts anchored the line, their massive shields absorbing fire while their guns carved through enemy vessels. But the numbers were overwhelming. For every council ship humanity destroyed, 2 more took its place. Human ships began to fall rapidly. Admiral Hanna's flagship took critical damage within the first hour, its engines failing and its weapon systems offline. Medical Officer Dong-min operated on wounded crew while the ship shook apart around him, saving lives even as death closed in. High Counselor Vextra watched the battle from his bunker on Council Prime, deep beneath the planet's surface. He felt satisfaction as human ships burned. They had fought well, but numbers always won in the end. By tomorrow, humanity would be broken, and the Council would emerge stronger than ever. He had no idea that halfway across the galaxy, Commander Kyungsoo had just activated the first Ragnarok device. The star system, designated as Staging Ground Alpha, had been empty of life but full of military infrastructure. Supply depots, repair facilities, and ammunition stores filled the space around the star. Thousands of council personnel worked there, maintaining the logistics network that fed the war machine. When the Ragnarok device activated, the star began to collapse. It happened faster than anyone expected, the stellar matter compressing into an impossible density. Within minutes, the star had become a black hole and everything in the system was pulled toward it. Ships, stations, and people all fell into the gravity well. Their final screams cut short as they crossed the event. Horizon, the second device, activated. 10 minutes later at staging ground Beta. The third followed soon after at staging ground Gamma. 3 star systems collapsed into singularities, their deaths visible across half the galaxy as massive gravitational waves rippled through space. Commander Kyung-soo broadcast the ultimatum on every frequency, ensuring every council world could hear it. This is Commander Kyung-soo of Earth's military forces. 3 of your staging ground systems have been destroyed. We have more Ragnarok devices positioned throughout council space. Surrender now, or we will activate them in populated systems. The council fleet at Council Prime stopped firing. Ship captains broadcast desperate messages to their commanders asking for orders. Should they continue fighting? Should they surrender? What about their families on the threatened worlds? Admiral Hana, her flagship barely functioning, ordered a ceasefire. The human fleet stopped shooting and waited. For a long moment, space was silent except for the crackle of damaged systems and the cries of the wounded. Then High Counselor Vextra's guards came for him. They were council soldiers, but they were also people with families on worlds that might be destroyed. They dragged him from his bunker and brought him before the council chamber. Representatives from 400 species, many of them species that had suffered under council rule, voted to remove him from power. Diplomatic Overseer Queln, seeing which way the wind was blowing, stepped forward and offered unconditional surrender. The Galactic Council, which had ruled for 800 years, dissolved itself within hours. Species that had been enemies just days ago began talking about forming something new, something better. President Ji-won addressed the galaxy from Earth one final time. Her face was tired, her uniform stained, but her voice was strong. The Galactic Council is ended. In its place, we propose the Federation of Free Worlds. Every species will have equal representation. No species will be enslaved or exploited. No world will be conquered or relocated. And any species that commits atrocities will face justice regardless of their power. She paused, looking directly into the camera. Humanity didn't want this war. We reached out in peace and were answered with massacre. We fought because we had no choice. But now we have a choice. We can continue the cycle of violence, or we can build something better. We choose to build. The response was overwhelming. Species across the galaxy voted to join the Federation. Some council species, those that had committed the worst crimes, were tried and punished. Others, those that had simply followed orders, were given the chance to make amends. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was a start. 10 years later, Admiral Hana stood at the New Soul Memorial, now rebuilt as a symbol of resistance and sacrifice. The station had been reconstructed, bigger and better than before. A place where people from 100 different species lived and worked together. She placed flowers at the name of Ambassador Dae-hyun and his daughter Minji. The old ambassador had survived the war but died peacefully 5 years ago, his life's work completed. Minji's name was carved alongside 15,000 others, a reminder of the price of freedom. Pilot Soo-jin, now an instructor at the Federation's military academy, trained the next generation of defenders. Her students came from dozens of species, all learning to protect the peace that had been so dearly won. She taught them to be skilled and strong, but also taught them restraint and mercy. The Federation needed warriors, but it needed them to be better than the enemies they had defeated. President Ji-won, serving her 3rd term as Federation Chancellor, oversaw a galaxy transformed. 400 species that had once been divided between rulers and subjects now worked together as equals. It wasn't always easy. Old hatreds didn't disappear overnight, but it was better than what had come before.